December 5th, 1945. Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station, Florida. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers sat on the tarmac with their engines warming, propellers cutting the humid air. Clear skies, calm seas, unlimited visibility.
14 men across the 5 aircraft had been briefed on navigation problem number 1, a standard triangular training route over the Bahamas. East to Hen and Chicken Shoals for practice bombing, then north, then southwest back to Fort Lauderdale. Every instrument had been checked. The weather was confirmed clear along the entire route. It was supposed to be just another routine training exercise, 4 hours out and back, nothing they hadn't done before. Not one of those 14 men would ever return. By nightfall, the missing would number 27. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, 28 years old, a combat veteran who had survived being shot down over the Marshall Islands during the Pacific Campaign. He had earned his wings in battle. But Taylor had only recently transferred to Fort Lauderdale and didn't know the Bahamas well. He had actually requested to sit this mission out, a request that was denied. The man leading 5 aircraft over unfamiliar waters was the one person who had asked not to be there. The other 4 pilots, Captain Edward Powers, Ensign Joseph Bossy, Lieutenant Forrest Gerber, and Lieutenant Robert Stivers, were experienced aviators completing advanced overwater navigation training. Most had seen combat. They had flown this route before. They trusted Taylor's rank, his record, his judgment. That trust was going to cost all of them everything. At 2:10 p.m., Flight 19 launched in formation, 5 Avengers climbing into clear sky. They reached the target zone on schedule, dropped their practice ordnance, and turned north for the return leg. Compasses steady, radios clear. Everything proceeding normally. Then 90 minutes in, Taylor's compasses failed, both instruments spinning uselessly. He radioed Fort Lauderdale that he couldn't tell which direction was west. The tool that had guided him through Pacific combat was now dead. His heading contradicted what the other 4 pilots saw on their own working compasses. But protocol was absolute. Follow the flight leader, no matter what. The students had been trained to trust the chain of command above their own instruments. The most dangerous phase of Flight 19 had begun. No one on the ground fully understood it yet. Taylor believed they had drifted over the Florida Keys and banked northeast to correct course. He was actually over the Bahamas, far to the east. Each correction pushed the formation deeper into the open Atlantic. The student pilots could see the error on their own compasses, every needle pointing west, toward land. One of them suggested flying west. Taylor overruled him. Training held. You follow the flight leader. By 4:45 p.m., fear crept into Taylor's transmissions. He decided to fly north, convinced he was heading back toward Fort Lauderdale, when in reality, he was flying the mirror image of the correct heading, moving deeper into the ocean with every passing minute. Fort Lauderdale asked him to switch to the emergency frequency for a bearing fix. Taylor refused, afraid of losing radio contact with his students if they changed channels. That single decision might have been the one chance to save them all. Radio interference blocked every other attempt at a fix. The sun dropped below the horizon. 5 aircraft were now flying blind over open water in total darkness, with fuel gauges falling toward empty. Taylor's last transmission came at 6:20 p.m. He told his pilots they would ditch together when the first plane's fuel hit 10 gallons. His voice carried the flat certainty of a man who had already accepted what was coming. After that, nothing. No beacon, no final call. 5 aircraft carrying 14 men flew into the Atlantic night and simply ceased to exist. A PBM-5 Mariner flying boat launched from Banana River Naval Air Station at 7:27 p.m. with 13 crew members to search for Flight 19's last estimated position. 23 minutes after takeoff, the Mariner sent a routine radio check. Then it went silent. No distress call, no further word. Around the same time, the merchant vessel SS Gaines Mills reported seeing an explosion in the sky and a fireball hitting the ocean, followed by an oil slick spreading across the water. The mariners were notorious among crews for their volatile fuel systems. They called them flying gas tanks. In less than 5 hours, the Navy had lost 6 aircraft and 27 men. Not in combat, not in a storm, on a routine training flight off the Florida coast, in peacetime, on a clear December afternoon. The Navy launched the largest air and sea search in its history. Hundreds of aircraft, dozens of ships, 300,000 square miles of ocean from the Bahamas to the open Atlantic. They searched for 5 days, dragging shallows and scanning depths. They found nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no bodies. Not a single fragment of 6 aircraft that together weighed over 60 tons. The Board of Investigation couldn't explain what happened. Taylor's mother challenged the pilot error finding, and the Navy amended its report. The official cause became 4 words: causes or reasons unknown. Flight 19 became the foundational case of the Bermuda Triangle legend, the incident that gave the mystery its name and its grip on the public imagination. What makes this harder to dismiss than mythology is the raw fact. 5 aircraft with functioning radios flew into clear skies, maintained contact with their base, and reported their confusion in real time on an open channel. The rescue planes sent to find them vanished as well. If 5 12-ton torpedo bombers ran out of fuel and ditched in the Atlantic, where is the wreckage? 60 tons of aluminum doesn't simply vanish from seawater. Nearly 8 decades have passed. Not a single piece of wreckage from Flight 19 or the PBM Mariner has surfaced. 27 men left Florida on a clear December afternoon in 1945. The Atlantic has returned nothing. No answers, no remains, just names on a memorial.
The Navy's official verdict, causes or reasons unknown, satisfied no one. And the Bermuda Triangle wasn't finished with that corridor of ocean. 3 years later, a civilian aircraft carrying 32 passengers would vanish over the same stretch of water. The pilot had already been cleared for landing. The runway lights were on. He never arrived.
December 28, 1948, San Juan, Puerto Rico. A Douglas DC-3, the reliable workhorse of commercial aviation, sat loaded on the tarmac for a late-night charter to Miami. 32 passengers boarded that evening. Most were Puerto Rican families heading to Florida for the New Year's holiday, carrying suitcases and gifts for relatives they would never see. The captain was Robert Lindquist, experienced, familiar with the route, and calm under pressure. The flight from San Juan to Miami covered roughly 1,000 miles, 3.5 hours in the air. They would land before dawn. The DC-3 took off at 10:03 p.m. It climbed to cruising altitude, crossed Puerto Rico's northern coast,
and turned northwest over open water. The first 2 hours passed without incident. Clear weather, light winds, everything running exactly as it should. At 4:13 a.m., Lindquist contacted Miami Approach Control. He reported his position as 50 miles south of the city and requested landing instructions, his voice steady and professional, betraying no sign of trouble. Miami confirmed and prepared for arrival, alerting ground crews and switching on the runway lights. Lindquist acknowledged. There was nothing in that transmission to suggest he was speaking his final words. The aircraft was 20 minutes from touchdown, already descending on its approach path. 32 passengers were likely watching for Miami's lights through the windows below. They were almost home.
That was the last anyone ever heard from him. No follow-up call, no distress signal, no emergency beacon. Just silence.
The DC-3 never appeared on radar. It never came into visual range. Somewhere in that 50-mile gap between the last radio contact and the runway, the aircraft and everyone aboard simply vanished. The search began within the hour. Coast Guard cutters swept the waters south of Miami, while aircraft flew systematic grid patterns over the Florida Straits, accounting for the Gulf Stream's drift. They expanded from Miami to Palm Beach, into the Bahamas, across the shallow banks. They found nothing. No seat cushions, no life vests, no fuselage fragments. An aircraft that size striking water should have scattered debris across miles of surface. No witnesses came forward. Not a single vessel in one of the busiest waterways in the Western Hemisphere reported anything unusual that night. The silence was absolute. The Civil Aeronautics Administration examined everything. Lindquist's flying record was spotless. The aircraft's maintenance logs showed no unresolved issues. Weather along the entire route had been confirmed clear with light winds and unrestricted visibility. Every standard explanation collapsed under scrutiny. Electrical failure didn't fit. Lindquist had already confirmed his radio and navigation systems were working when he contacted Miami. Structural failure should have left debris in these shallow waters. The Gulf Stream might have carried floating wreckage northward. But Lindquist never reported an emergency. His last transmission was routine, a calm request for landing clearance. Therefore, whatever happened must have occurred silently and instantaneously, without warning or time for even a single word. The CAA's final report settled on language that had become grimly familiar: insufficient information to determine probable cause. 3 aircraft had now vanished over the same corridor in 3 years. Flight 19 in 1945, the British Star Tiger in January 1948, and Lindquist's DC-3 that December. 3 different operators, 3 different aircraft types, 3 completely different circumstances. Yet the outcome was always identical: total disappearance without a trace. Was the Bermuda Triangle a genuine zone of danger, or just coincidence amplified by fear and the human need to find patterns in random loss? What made Lindquist's case harder to dismiss was how close he had been. 50 miles from Miami, already descending, cleared for landing, close enough that his passengers could have seen the city lights. He wasn't lost over deep ocean hundreds of miles from anywhere. He was nearly home. The Florida Straits are among the most heavily surveyed waters on Earth, shallow enough that a sunken aircraft should be visible, busy enough that floating debris would have been spotted within hours. If the plane broke apart, wreckage would have scattered. If it ditched intact, the fuselage would sit on a shallow bottom. If the radio failed, the aircraft would still have reached Miami on its existing heading. 76 years have passed. Not the aircraft, not luggage, not a single body. Nothing has surfaced from those waters.
32 people boarded a routine flight in San Juan.
The pilot confirmed his position to Miami Tower and began his approach. 20 minutes from the runway, close enough to see the lights, they simply ceased to exist. Flight 19 and the DC-3 vanished in an age of radar, radio, and organized rescue operations, yet left nothing behind. The next story reaches back over a century to the open Pacific, where there was no such infrastructure. Just a wooden ship, 20 men, and a whale that chose to attack. What followed would take 90 days and cost 12 lives. The Essex set sail from Nantucket in August 1819 on what was supposed to be a 2.5-year whaling voyage. She was 87 feet long, 238 tons, built specifically for one purpose: hunt sperm whales, process their blubber into oil, and return with profit. 2 profitable Pacific voyages were already behind her, a sound hull, tested rigging, nothing to suggest disaster. Most of her crew were Nantucket teenagers with few options outside the whaling trade. The island's entire economy revolved around whale oil, and a successful voyage could set a young man up for life. Failure meant returning to an island with nothing. None of them realized that morning that they were about to become part of the most famous shipwreck in American literary history. Captain George Pollard Jr. was 29 and commanding the Essex for the first time. He was deliberate and cautious, a man who followed procedure and weighed his options carefully. His first mate, Owen Chase, operated from the opposite instinct: ambitious, instinctive, supremely confident in his own judgment. Chase acted first and questioned later. Pollard deliberated. Their contrasting approaches to leadership wouldn't matter during the months of sailing and hunting. The test would come later, when 20 men were stranded in the open Pacific with 3 small boats, dwindling food, and a decision that would determine who lived and who died. That decision would involve choosing between a 700-mile route to safety and a 3,000-mile detour into the unknown. On November 20th, 1820, the Essex was hunting roughly 1,000 miles west of the Galapagos. Chase and his crew had lowered their whaleboats to pursue a pod of sperm whales, leaving the ship behind with a skeleton crew. While they were gone, an enormous bull whale, estimated at 85 feet, surfaced near the Essex. It turned toward the ship and charged, striking the bow with enough force to shatter the timbers. No ship had ever been deliberately rammed by a whale before. Chase rowed back and found the whale 300 yards out, turning for a second pass. The second strike hit dead center. The hull split open. Water flooded the hold so fast that the Essex rolled onto her beam within minutes. The crew managed to salvage 3 whaleboats, hardtack, water casks, and a few navigation instruments before the ship went under completely. 20 men now floated in the open Pacific, 2,000 miles from the nearest land. They faced an impossible choice. The Marquesas Islands lay 700 miles to the west, the closest inhabited land. But Chase refused that route, convinced from stories he had heard that cannibals inhabited those islands and would kill them.
Instead, he argued for the grueling 3,000 miles southern passage towards South America, gambling they could catch the trade winds and reach Chile alive.
Pollard knew the math was against them. The Marquesas were closer. The food wouldn't last. But Chase's certainty swayed him, and he ordered the boats south. They turned away from the nearest land and toward an ocean crossing that would consume their supplies entirely. They had chosen 3,000 miles of open water to escape cannibals. The Pacific was about to teach them what that choice would cost.
Within weeks, their food rotted and water fouled. Rations dwindled to 6 ounces of hardtack and half a pint of water daily. The sun scorched their skin raw. Salt spray infected their wounds. Men began to die. Matthew Joy was the first to go, his body committed to the ocean on January 10th. They managed to find Henderson Island and scavenge some shellfish, but it wasn't nearly enough. 3 men chose to stay behind. The rest continued in 2 boats.
Once they consumed the first body, a man already dead from exposure, there was no going back. Each corpse became sustenance, and the Pacific held them in a grotesque limbo, neither killing them quickly nor letting them live. When the dead ran out, they drew lots. Owen Coffin, the captain's own cousin, drew the short straw. Pollard begged him to reconsider. Coffin refused. The captain fired. Chase's crew endured similar horror across 90 days before the British merchant ship Indian spotted them on February 18, 1821. Chase and 1 crewman were barely alive, still clutching bones. 5 days later, the Dolphin found Pollard's boat. 2 survivors left, holding the remains of their dead. The 3 men left on Henderson Island were rescued months later. Of the 20 who had sailed from Nantucket aboard the Essex, 8 made it home. 12 did not. Pollard went back to sea. His next command, the 2 brothers, struck a reef on its maiden voyage and sank. No company in Nantucket would hire him as captain again. He spent the rest of his life as a night watchman, walking streets built by men who had gone to sea and come back. Chase published his account in 1821. 30 years later, Herman Melville, himself a former whaler, read it and recognized something beyond mere disaster. Moby Dick emerged in 1851, and the white whale became immortal. There is a bitter irony that neither Melville nor Chase ever fully articulated. If the crew had sailed west toward the Marquesas, 700 miles instead of 3,000, most would have survived. The very savagery they fled from on those islands became the savagery they inflicted on each other at sea. Their attempt to escape danger manufactured the exact horror they were running from. Chase made the wrong call. Pollard knew it. 12 men died because of it. And then there is the whale itself. Was it protecting its pod? Reacting to the vibrations of the hunt? Or something else entirely? The Essex remains the only confirmed case of a sperm whale deliberately ramming and sinking a ship. 2 centuries later, we still don't know why it charged. The Essex crew at least witnessed their attacker. They saw the whale charge twice and understood what destroyed them, even if the reason stayed hidden. The next case offers no such clarity. A World War II bomber vanished in 1943 with just 1 line in the military record, failed to return. 15 years later, the Sahara Desert would prove that record wrong. April 4th, 1943, Soluch Airfield, Libya, a barren stretch of tarmac in the North African desert where the U.S. Army Air Forces had recently established operations. 25 B-24D Liberator bombers sat armed and fueled on the runway. The plan was straightforward: fly north across the Mediterranean, bomb Naples Harbor, return to base. A 400-mile round trip that experienced crews had done many times before. But the Lady Be Good was not crewed by veterans. Her pilot, Second Lieutenant William Hatton, was 24 years old and flying his first combat mission. His entire 9-man crew had arrived in North Africa just days earlier. None of them were battle-tested. None were familiar with the route or the terrain below. When things fell apart that night, they would have no experience to draw from, no instinct honed by previous flights. This would be their first mission and their last. The bombers launched in late afternoon, climbing toward the Mediterranean, with Lady Be Good among the last to depart. Almost immediately, a massive sandstorm rolled in, scattering the formation and destroying visibility. Most planes either turned back or pushed through alone. Lady Be Good's radio operators sent one final message requesting a bearing back to base. No response came. The signal either failed to transmit or was swallowed by the storm's interference. The aircraft never returned that night or the next day. The Army Air Forces recorded it in a single line: failed to return from mission. Presumed lost at sea. 9 crew members were marked missing in action, presumed dead. For 15 years, Lady Be Good was just another name on the long list of wartime losses. Young men swallowed by the sea, no questions asked. That was where the story ended. Until November 1958, when an oil exploration team flying over the Libyan desert spotted something impossible. 400 miles inland, deep in the Sahara's Kalanchio Sand Sea, a B-24D Liberator sat on the sand, completely intact. No crash crater, no twisted metal, no fire damage, just a near-perfect belly landing, as if the pilot had set it down carefully and walked away. When the USAF recovery team arrived in 1959, the preservation was almost eerie. The fuselage was untouched, machine guns still loaded, the radio functional, even a thermos of water still drinkable after 16 years. The dry desert air had kept everything frozen in time, a capsule from 1943, undisturbed and waiting. Everything remained exactly as it had been left, but the 9 men who had flown it were gone. Lady Be Good had not crashed into the Mediterranean as the records claimed. She had flown 700 miles in the wrong direction, past the coastline, past her own airfield, and deep into one of Earth's most hostile environments. The military had gotten it completely wrong. The sea never took her. The desert did. The crew had bailed out before the plane landed itself. All 9 parachutes deployed successfully. They regrouped on the ground and began walking north toward what they thought was the nearby Mediterranean coast, not realizing it was 400 miles away. Over the following years, search teams recovered 8 of the 9 crew members scattered across the desert, their remains marking an agonizing 80-mile path northward. They had split into 2 groups, those still able to walk and those who couldn't. Among the discoveries was co-pilot Robert Toner's diary. His entries documented their final days with devastating precision. Supplies inventoried on day 1, almost nothing. Walking begun on day 2, men collapsing by day 5. Day 8 was his last entry. The handwriting had deteriorated with each page.
The final 5 were found huddled together in a shallow depression they had dug for shelter. The 9th man, the bombardier, was never found, though his open parachute lay miles away, suggesting he had landed alone and walked in a different direction entirely.
The real puzzle isn't what happened to them. Their fate was written in the sand. The question is how a bombing run to Naples sent them 700 miles in the opposite direction. The most likely explanation involves a malfunctioning radio altimeter combined with the autopilot. Over featureless desert at night with no lights or landmarks below, the flat Sahara would have been indistinguishable from the Mediterranean. The crew believed they were flying over water.
When the fuel ran out, they bailed expecting to land in the sea. They hit sand instead. Then they walked north into a desert so vast that 80 miles of walking barely registered on a map.
But other bombers caught in the same sandstorm made it back to Saluch that night. Lady Be Good didn't. How does a plane fly directly over its own airfield and keep going for another 400 miles without anyone on board realizing it?
The radio altimeter failed. The bearing request went unanswered. The direction finder didn't guide them home. 9 men walked away from a perfectly functional aircraft toward a coast that was impossibly far away. 4 journeys spanning more than a century. 4 departures with clear destinations. None of them arrived.
Flight 19, 5 torpedo bombers, 14 men. A combat veteran whose compasses failed and whose refusal to switch frequencies sealed their course. The rescue plane sent to find them exploded 23 minutes after takeoff. 27 people, 6 aircraft, 300,000 square miles searched. Not a single fragment recovered in 79 years.
The Douglas DC-3, 32 passengers on a routine charter from San Juan. The pilot was calm. He was cleared for landing. He was 50 miles from Miami with the runway lights on. He never arrived. The CAA examined everything and explained nothing. 76 years later, the Florida Straits have yielded not one trace.
The Essex, rammed twice by an 85-foot sperm whale, the only confirmed case in maritime history. 20 men in 3 boats chose 3,000 miles over 700. They fled cannibals and became them. 12 died. 8 came home. 1 became a night watchman. 1 became Moby Dick. Lady Be Good. 9 men on their first combat mission, lost in a sandstorm, carried 700 miles past safety by instruments that lied. Found 16 years later in the Sahara with loaded guns, a working radio, and a thermos of drinkable water. The crew walked 80 miles toward a coast they never reached. Compasses failed. Instruments lied. Wrong decisions were made. And in every case, the people who departed never made it to where they were going.